What if the most disturbing science fiction movie of the decade wasn't really science fiction at all? What if Under the Skin was actually a hidden experiment about human behavior, filmed in the real world, with real people who had no idea what was happening around them? For years, this film has haunted audiences like a fragmented nightmare. Not because of monsters, not because of jump scares, but because it feels wrong in a way few psychological films ever do. Cold, empty, intimate, alien, like watching humanity through the eyes of something that doesn't belong here. And the terrifying part? That feeling wasn't created only in editing rooms or through visual effects. It was embedded into the production itself. Behind the hypnotic soundtrack, the dark symbolism, and the surreal imagery, the making of this film became one of the strangest cinematic experiments in modern movie history. Director Jonathan Glazer didn't want polished Hollywood realism. He wanted raw human reactions, genuine discomfort, authentic vulnerability. So instead of building a traditional sci-fi production, he blurred the line between fiction and reality until even the cast sometimes felt lost inside the experience. And at the center of it all was Scarlett Johansson, one of the biggest stars on Earth, driving anonymously through real streets, interacting with strangers who didn't realize they were inside a movie. No giant film crews, no obvious cameras, no dramatic lighting setups, just hidden cameras quietly recording ordinary people speaking to a Hollywood actress without recognizing her. That alone sounds surreal. But the deeper you go into the production of Under the Skin, the more unsettling it becomes. Because this wasn't simply a movie about an alien disguising itself as human. The entire filmmaking process was designed to imitate alien observation. The cameras watched people the way a predator studies prey. Conversations became social experiments. Human intimacy became something clinical and terrifying. Even the performances were stripped of warmth on purpose, creating a detached atmosphere that now feels almost hypnotic. And then there were the scenes that pushed the emotional limits of everyone involved. Moments so uncomfortable that even crew members reportedly struggled to process what they were witnessing during filming. Sequences constructed with silence instead of dialogue. Horror created through emotional absence rather than violence. A production environment where isolation, confusion, and emotional numbness weren't accidents, but part of the artistic design. What makes this story even more fascinating is that audiences initially rejected the film. Many viewers walked away confused, disturbed, even angry. Critics argued over whether it was genius or pretentious nonsense. But over time, something strange happened. The film started growing inside people's minds, like a memory they couldn't shake, like a dream that becomes more disturbing the longer you think about it. Today, Under the Skin is considered one of the most psychologically unsettling and intellectually haunting films ever made. Not because it explains itself, but because it refuses to. And once you discover what truly happened behind the scenes, the movie transforms into something even darker. Because the deeper you look into these filming methods, the more one terrifying question begins to emerge. Were the people on screen really watching the alien? Or was the alien quietly studying all of us? And maybe that's why films like Under the Skin stay with us for so long. Because beneath the science fiction, beneath the psychological horror, beneath the surreal cinematography and hidden camera realism, there's something deeply human hiding inside the darkness. Something uncomfortable that most movies are too afraid to explore. So before we go deeper into the disturbing reality behind these filming techniques, I want to ask you something. Have you ever watched a movie that made you feel emotionally unsettled for days afterward? A film that you couldn't fully explain, but somehow couldn't stop thinking about either? If you've ever experienced that, comment below and tell me what film did that to you. I genuinely read these conversations, and some of the most fascinating psychological movie recommendations on this channel come directly from you. And if you enjoy deep dives into disturbing cinema, hidden meanings, filmmaking secrets, psychological horror, and the dark stories behind legendary movies. Take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Every interaction helps this channel reach more people who are obsessed with the strange, the unsettling, and the cinematic mysteries most audiences never notice. Because what happened during the making of this film goes far beyond normal movie production. The deeper you look into the methods used by Jonathan Glazer and the haunting performance created by Scarlett Johansson, the more it starts to feel less like a movie set and more like a psychological experiment unfolding in real time. And it all began with one terrifying idea that completely changed how this film would be made. The strange thing about Under the Skin is that almost everything about it feels artificial at first glance. The empty expressions, the unnatural conversations, the cold silence between characters. It feels calculated, distant, almost dreamlike. And yet the deeper you dig into the production, the more you realize something deeply unsettling. A shocking amount of what you're watching is real. Not Hollywood real, not carefully rehearsed realism. Actual reality unfolding in front of hidden cameras. And that decision changed everything. When Jonathan Glazer began developing the movie, he became obsessed with one idea. If the story was truly about an alien studying humanity, then the film itself needed to observe people the same way an alien would. Detached, curious, emotionless, almost predatory. So instead of building a traditional production filled with giant cameras, visible crews, and scripted interactions, Glazer stripped the filmmaking process down to something that felt almost invisible. Small vans were equipped with hidden cameras. Microphones were concealed. Entire interactions were filmed in real public spaces with ordinary people who believed they were simply talking to a stranger. And that stranger was Scarlett Johansson, which still sounds impossible when you think about it. Today, Scarlett Johansson is one of the most recognizable faces on Earth. But during filming, she would drive through real streets in Scotland, stopping to pick up random men while cameras secretly recorded everything happening inside the vehicle. Most of them didn't recognize her. Some thought she was flirting. Some looked nervous. Some became strangely vulnerable within minutes. And what makes these scenes so disturbing isn't the dialogue itself. It's the authenticity hiding underneath it. Because you're not watching actors perform discomfort. You're watching real human uncertainty. That's why the film has this hypnotic psychological horror atmosphere that almost no other sci-fi movie can replicate. The tension doesn't come from loud music or jump scares. It comes from the feeling that reality itself has become unstable. Conversations feel slightly wrong. Smiles last too long. Silences become oppressive. Human interaction starts feeling alien. And honestly, that's exactly what Glazer wanted. The production reportedly captured hours and hours of footage of spontaneous conversations, awkward encounters, and unpredictable reactions. The crew couldn't fully control what would happen next because real people are chaotic. Sometimes the scenes became funny, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes emotionally revealing in ways nobody expected. And instead of removing those imperfections, the film embraced them. That's what gives Under the Skin its almost documentary-like realism beneath all the surreal symbolism and art house cinematography. But this method also created an atmosphere that became psychologically exhausting for everyone involved. Because after a while, the line between performance and observation started disappearing. Scarlett Johansson wasn't simply acting like an alien anymore. She was spending hours silently studying strangers, analyzing behavior, watching loneliness unfold in real time through a car window, moving through empty streets at night. And the darker the production became, the more the film started uncovering something disturbing about human nature itself. If this part of the story already feels unsettling, wait until you hear what happened when the movie began filming its most emotionally devastating scenes. If the word alien suddenly feels less like science fiction and more like a mirror, comment Observe below. What makes the filming of Under the Skin so emotionally disturbing isn't only the hidden camera realism or the psychological tension. It's the fact that, little by little, the movie stops feeling like science fiction and starts feeling painfully human. And nowhere is that more visible than in the scenes that almost broke the emotional balance of the production itself. Because beneath all the surreal imagery and art house horror, this film is obsessed with one terrifying question. What happens when empathy begins to appear inside something that was never supposed to feel human at all? That question transformed the atmosphere on set. As filming continued, Scarlett Johansson reportedly began stripping away almost every natural emotional instinct from her performance. Her movements became mechanical. Her voice flattened into something emotionless and distant. Even the way she looked at people was carefully controlled to feel observational instead of emotional. The goal wasn't to create a character in the traditional cinematic sense. The goal was to create a presence, something watching humanity from the outside. And honestly, that's part of why the movie feels so deeply unsettling. Most psychological horror films guide your emotions. They tell you when to feel fear, tension, sadness, relief. But Under the Skin refuses to comfort you. The silence stretches too long. Conversations feel incomplete. Human connection appears fragile and temporary. Even intimacy becomes cold and predatory. It creates this overwhelming feeling of emotional isolation that slowly starts crawling under your skin while you watch. But then the production reached one sequence that changed everything. The beach scene. If you've seen the film, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, this is the moment where many viewers suddenly realize they're watching something far darker than a normal sci-fi movie. The sequence itself is horrifying because almost nothing dramatic happens on the surface. There's no loud music forcing emotion, no explosive violence, no exaggerated acting, just chaos unfolding with terrifying indifference. A family tragedy happens near the ocean while Scarlett Johansson's alien character observes the situation with complete emotional detachment. And in the middle of it all, a baby is left alone on the beach, crying endlessly beside the waves. That image haunted audiences for years, not because it was graphic, because it felt emotionally real. The scene weaponizes absence. Nobody comforts the child. Nobody rushes in to save the moment emotionally for the audience. The camera simply watches, coldly, silently, like nature itself observing human suffering without intervention. And according to people connected to the production, even members of the crew reportedly struggled with the emotional weight of filming it. Because the horror wasn't cinematic anymore. It felt existential. That's the hidden power behind Jonathan Glazer's filmmaking style. He removes emotional guidance until the audience is forced to confront the emptiness directly. There's no heroic music telling you what to feel, no comforting explanation, just human vulnerability exposed under an almost alien gaze. And strangely enough, that emotional emptiness begins changing the alien herself. As the film progresses, something subtle starts happening beneath the surface. The predator begins hesitating. Observing people stops feeling purely clinical. Curiosity slowly mutates into empathy. And that shift created some of the most psychologically intense moments during production, because the movie suddenly stopped asking what aliens think about humans and started asking what humans actually are beneath all the social performance, desire, loneliness, and fear. If you're still here, comment "human" below, because the next part of this story is where the film's true meaning begins revealing itself in ways most audiences completely missed the first time they watched it. By the end of Under the Skin, something strange happens to almost everyone who watches it. You stop trying to understand the plot in a normal way. The movie slips past logic and starts affecting you emotionally, almost subconsciously, like a memory you can't fully explain. And that's probably the biggest reason the film became a cult psychological horror masterpiece years after audiences initially rejected it. Because the real meaning of Under the Skin was never hidden inside the science fiction. It was hidden inside us. When the film first released, many viewers were frustrated by how cold and abstract it felt. People expected answers, explanations, traditional storytelling. Instead, Jonathan Glazer gave audiences silence, ambiguity, isolation, and emotional discomfort. Critics argued endlessly over what the alien represented: desire, predation, femininity, loneliness, depression, human disconnection. Some people called it genius. Others thought it was unbearable. But over time, the film started evolving in people's minds. And that's where it becomes fascinating. Because once you know how the movie was filmed, the hidden cameras, the real strangers, the emotional detachment, the voyeuristic perspective, the entire experience changes. Suddenly, the alien doesn't feel like a monster invading humanity. She feels like someone trying to understand what being human even means. And the answer she discovers is terrifying. Humans crave intimacy, but constantly hurt each other. People desperately want connection, yet spend most of their lives emotionally isolated. Desire becomes transactional. Loneliness becomes invisible. Vulnerability becomes dangerous. Throughout the film, the alien slowly realizes that human existence is built on contradiction. We want to be seen, but we hide ourselves constantly. That's why the final act feels so emotionally devastating. For the first time, the alien stops observing humanity from a distance and begins emotionally participating in it. She hesitates. She becomes curious. She starts developing empathy. And ironically, the more human she becomes, the more fragile she becomes too. The predator loses emotional detachment and suddenly experiences fear, shame, vulnerability, even identity confusion. And maybe that's the cruelest idea hidden inside the movie. To become human is to become breakable. There's a reason the ending of Under the Skin stays burned into people's memories long after the credits roll. Not because it explains anything, but because it strips everything down to raw existential horror. Beneath the alien imagery, the surreal soundtrack, and the hypnotic cinematography, the movie is quietly asking one horrifying question. What if being human is itself a deeply strange experience? What if we all spend our lives trapped inside bodies we barely understand, searching for connection while simultaneously fearing exposure? That's why the film still feels ahead of its time today. In an era dominated by loud blockbusters and fast entertainment, Under the Skin forces people into silence. It slows you down until you begin noticing the uncomfortable emptiness underneath modern human interaction. And once that feeling settles into your mind, it becomes almost impossible to shake. Which is why so many people revisit the movie years later and suddenly realize they weren't really watching an alien study humanity. They were watching humanity study itself. And honestly, that may be far more disturbing. If this film left you with that strange feeling you can't quite describe, comment Under the Skin below so I know you felt it too. And if you enjoy psychological cinema, disturbing movie analysis, hidden meanings, filmmaking mysteries, and dark storytelling breakdowns like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel because there are many more films hiding secrets like these beneath the surface.